He didn't see it coming. Not from Stuttgart. Not from Tokyo. Not even from Silicon Valley, the birthplace of the tech gods. But from a dusty corner of West Africa. Elon Musk. The man who launched rockets, wired cars to the cloud, and made sedans faster than Ferraris, was caught off guard by a group of engineers whose lab was smaller than an average Starbucks in downtown LA. No investors. No billion-dollar grants. Just heat, dust, and stubborn belief. They didn't wear suits. They wore sandals, old jeans, and calloused hands. But in those hands was a blueprint for something bigger than just a car. They called it ITAUA. It doesn't whisper luxury, it roars sovereignty. And when Captain Ibrahim Traoré unveiled it, he didn't just reveal a machine. He pulled the curtain off an entire future. If you're tired of stories that start in New York and end in Palo Alto, if you believe that dreams don't need a zip code, then stick around, like this video, and join us. Because this one came not from Wall Street, but from the red soil of freedom. And Elon. He wasn't laughing this time. The headlines hit like a thunderclap. Solar-powered EV built in Africa stuns auto industry. Burkina Faso challenges Tesla. Made without silicon. Powered by Sunday. In Detroit, execs spit out their coffee. In Palo Alto, interns stopped scrolling. Because the numbers were real. 330 kilometers on a single charge. 30-minute fast recharge. Solar panels that actually worked, not on a concept, but in the Sahara sun. It was as if someone had built a pickup truck in a barn in Texas. And drove it straight into Tesla's showroom. Except this one wasn't made for highways, it was made for hope. And hope travels faster than horsepower. In America, we love garage stories. Steve Jobs in his dad's garage. Bill Gates tinkering in a dorm. Even Ford began in a shed. But no one ever told the garage story that started with a dirt floor. No Wi-Fi, no funding. And where the only venture capital was hope. That garage was in Ouagadougou. And inside it, a team of young Africans, many of them barely out of college, set out to build the impossible. A solar-powered electric car. Designed from scratch. Built without blueprints from Detroit or Munich. And meant to survive not Silicon Valley, but the Sahel. They called it ITAUA, a name that means, the one who moves light, in a local dialect. It began with scrap metal from broken generators. Old batteries repurposed from telecom towers. Laptop motherboards soldered together with trembling hands. There was no whiteboard with a pitch deck. No latte-fueled brainstorms. Just solder smoke, bare feet, and the kind of belief that doesn't need approval from Wall Street. They didn't aim for luxury. They aimed for survival. Imagine this, you're in rural Burkina Faso. It's 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The road isn't even paved. The power grid hasn't worked in 3 days. Your options. A second-hand diesel truck imported from Thailand, noisy, leaky, and hungry for fuel you can't afford. Or a red, boxy EV that charges under the African sun. ITAUA. It doesn't need a plug. It doesn't beg the grid. It doesn't apologize for being built in the dust. It just moves. Silently. Like dignity with wheels. What the team at ITAUA built wasn't just transportation, it was defiance. While the world told Africa to wait, for aid, for imports, for help, they decided to move. And the brilliance of it wasn't just in the vehicle itself. It was in what it didn't need. It didn't need German suspension to handle broken roads, they designed their own. Built like off-road trucks. It didn't need Tesla's supercharger network, because it charges under the damn sun. It didn't need a California marketing agency, because its story writes itself. Back in the US, people still associate EVs with Whole Foods parking lots. With Wall Street guys flexing their green ethics in a black Model S. But the ITAUA. It's not for clout. It's for people. For mothers hauling crops. For nurses reaching remote villages. For children going to school without walking 10 miles in 100-degree heat. It's not a tech toy. It's a lifeline. And that's what made Elon Musk, and the entire industry, go quiet. Because for once, innovation didn't come from engineers in Patagonia jackets, sipping kombucha in a WeWork. It came from people who had nothing, except the will to create something truly theirs. The genius of ITAUA is that it isn't trying to be a Tesla killer. It's trying to be enough. Enough range to get you to the next town, 330 kilometers. Enough speed to outrun a storm. Enough efficiency to charge fully in 30 minutes, with solar backup if the grid fails. And enough resilience to take a beating, not on a racetrack, but on real African roads. They even designed the body with modular panels that could be swapped out with local materials. So that if one breaks, you don't need a shipment from China, just a hammer and local steel. And here's where it gets even more poetic. While Musk was tweeting about Mars, they were building for Earth. While Wall Street debated battery patents, they were melting scrap metal in backyard kilns. While Detroit worried about quarterly earnings, Burkina Faso worried about how to get nurses to clinics, without fuel, without imports, without waiting. And they found the answer. Build it yourself. Even if the world laughs. If this story moves you, not just the specs, but the spirit, then leave a comment. Not for the algorithm, but to be counted. Because Africa isn't waiting. And maybe, just maybe, your voice helps carry this story further than any engine could. Back to reality, the launch of ITAUA was never meant to compete. It was meant to claim. To claim dignity. To claim space. To claim the right to be more than a market. This is not about making Detroit jealous. This is about making Ouagadougou proud. When the first ITAUA rolled onto the cracked roads of Bobo Dioulasso, it didn't just move. It roared. Not from its motor, it was quiet. But from the streets. From the eyes of kids chasing it. From the mothers smiling as dust followed its wheels. From the silence of every expert who said it couldn't be done. And somewhere in a corner office in Palo Alto, Elon Musk watched that footage. And for the first time, in a long time, he didn't tweet. He listened. In America, we call it range anxiety. The fear that your electric car won't make it to the next charging station. It's why Tesla built thousands of superchargers. It's why EV drivers check apps before road trips. It's why the Midwest is still skeptical. But in Burkina Faso, there are no apps. There are no stations. And the grid fails more often than it works. So how do you build an electric car for a place where electricity is a rumor? Simple. You build it under the sun. The team behind ITAUA didn't wait for Western infrastructure to arrive. They knew the sun showed up every day. Even when the state didn't. Even when the roads broke. Even when the power lines buzzed with nothing. So they leaned on the one thing they could count on. The African sky. They engineered a charging system that didn't need a plug. Didn't need a station. Didn't need an outlet. They covered the car's shell in solar panels, panels designed to work in extreme heat. The kind of heat that fries consumer gadgets and melts dashboards. They used liquid-cooled cells, temperature-resistant polymers, and algorithms that adjusted energy conversion based on UV exposure. In other words, they made solar sexy. But more than that, they made it practical. While Tesla and Rivian are still testing solar options for luxury campers, the ITAUA team rolled it out, in a field, in a village, in real-world chaos. And it worked. People were charging their cars like they dry laundry. By leaving them out in the sun. No cables. No grid. Just sunlight, aluminum, and belief. Let's put this in context. In the US, we build EVs for convenience. Heated seats. Self-driving beta. Voice assistants that order pizza. In Burkina Faso, they build EVs so a teacher can get to class. So a mother can take her child to a clinic. So a farmer doesn't walk 10 miles to sell yams. It's not luxury. It's liberation. The technical specs are impressive: 330 kilometers range, 30-minute fast charge, full solar support. But what makes ITAUA extraordinary isn't what it can do. It's what it proves. It proves you don't need lithium from Chile. You don't need factories in Germany. You don't need venture capital from Silicon Valley. You need vision. You need purpose. You need to stop asking permission. One story says it all. In the village of Sapui, a grandmother named Mariam used to walk 3 hours in the heat to get medicine for her grandson. One day, she saw a red box on wheels pull up near the school. It was silent. It shimmered. It looked like something out of Wakanda. A nurse stepped out. She had driven from the city, in an ITAUA. No gas. No noise. No smoke. Just the sun. Since that day, Mariam hasn't walked once. She calls it the car of God's light. What the world missed, and Elon Musk never expected, is that the next frontier of technology isn't about speed or luxury. It's about fitting the world we actually live in. While Silicon Valley still designs for suburban garages and air-conditioned tech campuses, Burkina Faso is designing for reality. Dusty roads. Unreliable power. Unlimited sunlight. And most of all, untapped genius. If this feels like something more than just engineering, if it reminds you that dignity is worth designing for, leave a comment below. Tell us what part of the world you think needs its own ITAUA. Because this isn't a Burkina story. It's an Africa story. And maybe even a world story. Let's not forget, the average ITAUA engineer isn't a PhD from MIT. She's a 23-year-old graduate from Ouagadougou Tech. He's a welder who used to fix bicycles. They are coders without laptops, designers without AutoCAD, and dreamers who learned chemistry from YouTube on a cracked phone screen. And yet, they built something the world said was impossible. Not in a clean lab, but in the chaos of real life. And isn't that where all great ideas are born? So what does this mean? It means Africa doesn't need to wait for infrastructure, it can leapfrog it. Just like mobile phones skipped landlines. Just like M-Pesa replaced banks in Kenya. Now, solar cars may skip gas stations entirely. ITAUA isn't just a vehicle. It's a model. A proof point. A slap in the face to the old world order. And guess what? People are watching. From Nairobi to Lagos, from Bamako to Kigali. Young inventors are taking notes. Not from Detroit. Not from Shenzhen. But from Burkina Faso. Because when your neighbor does the impossible, you stop calling it impossible. What do you do when the world calls your country poor? When they look at your red soil and see only hunger, not potential? You could wait. Beg. Import their dreams and rent their dignity. Or you could do what Captain Ibrahim Traoré did. You build. This wasn't just about a car. This was about reclaiming destiny. When Traoré walked into the first ITAUA lab, a half-converted warehouse, no AC, rust on the walls, he didn't see mess. He saw momentum. He looked at wires and broken monitors and said, "Make it move." And they did. But he didn't stop at the vehicle. Because he understood something Silicon Valley forgot. A product is only as powerful as the ecosystem behind it. So he set out not just to launch a car, but to awaken an industrial uprising. First came the parts. Instead of importing everything from China, his team started designing modular components that could be made by local workshops. Plastic dashboards, molded in Ouagadougou. Seats, sewn in Bobo Dioulasso. Solar panels, assembled from recycled glass by students at a rural technical college. Then came the supply chain. Traoré's government funded the country's first battery recycling lab, turning used lithium scraps into new life. Instead of shipping gold, manganese, and graphite to Europe, they began processing it in-country, adding value before export. And finally came the vision. He didn't want Burkina Faso to be known for its mines. He wanted it known for its minds. New universities sprang up with programs in electrical engineering, mechatronics, and battery chemistry. Coding boot camps offered night classes, powered by solar lamps, where single mothers learned how to program EV control systems. Even prison inmates were taught welding and fabrication skills, not for pity, but for reintegration into a real economy. Traoré didn't just offer jobs. He offered redemption. Let's pause here. Because this is what most global analysts still don't understand. When you think about made in Africa, you picture raw materials, not real machinery. When you think about African leadership, you imagine speeches, not supply chains. But Traoré changed that. He didn't fly to Davos. He flew to the villages, where women still cook over firewood. And asked, "What do you need me to build?" Their answers became his blueprint. In the US, we talk a lot about resilience. But often, it's just a slogan on a coffee mug. In Burkina Faso, resilience is infrastructure built with bare hands. Steel cut with repurposed machines. Blueprints drawn by young minds who've never left the continent. It's not about bouncing back. It's about never backing down. If this is the Africa you believe in, not the one in charity ads, but the one that builds futures from the ground up, type "We move" in the comments. Let the algorithm know we're done waiting. Let the world know Burkina is building. And Africa is watching. And yes, the world is reacting. Behind closed doors in Berlin, Detroit, and Tokyo, consultants are drafting memos titled "The ITAUA Threat." Because they know the danger isn't just competition. It's contagion. What happens when other countries follow Traoré's model? What happens when Nigeria decides to stop importing EVs? What happens when Congo stops exporting raw cobalt and builds batteries instead? This isn't about electric cars. This is about electric minds. And the West. They're starting to sweat. There's a word that kept coming up in internal reports from multinationals. Uncontrollable. That's how they now describe Burkina Faso. Not because of coups, but because of independence they can't contain. Burkina isn't negotiating anymore. They're manufacturing. Not protest. Production. And nothing terrifies a system built on extraction more than a country that learns to extract itself from the chains. But the most powerful image came not from a press release, but from a child. In a dusty village in Tenkadogo, a boy about 7 watched an ITAUA glide by. He didn't know its specs. He didn't know who Elon Musk was. But he turned to his sister and said, "Look, it's ours. Let's be honest. Tesla isn't scared of a small red car made in Burkina Faso. What keeps them up at night is what's inside that car. Because under the hood of every EV isn't just wires and motors. It's a battery. And that battery is made of minerals Africa owns. Cobalt. Lithium. Graphite. Manganese. For decades, Africa mined it, and the world profited. Raw cobalt from Congo went to China. It came back as iPhones. As Teslas. As profit, for someone else. But now, countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mali are refusing to play middleman. They're banning raw exports. They're saying, refine it here. Build it here. Or go elsewhere. And that changes everything. Because if Africa processes its own minerals and builds its own batteries, then controls the entire EV supply chain. Who controls the future? When Elon Musk sees ITAUA, he doesn't just see competition. He sees a chain reaction. He sees Nigeria building battery plants. He sees Congo setting price floors on cobalt. He sees African nations refusing to trade wealth for scraps. And most of all, he sees the end of the Western monopoly on clean energy. Because how can you lead a green revolution if the green isn't yours? If you believe Africa deserves more than just a shovel in the ground. If you believe it deserves equity in the energy of tomorrow. Type "We power ourselves" in the comments. Let the world know. Africa doesn't just power batteries. It powers change. The world didn't expect this. Not from Burkina Faso. Not from dust and heat. Not from a continent they only called when they needed minerals. But here it is. A car that doesn't just run. It speaks. A battery that doesn't just store energy. It stores sovereignty. And a leader who doesn't ask to join the table. He builds his own. So let this be heard. From the streets of Ouagadougou. To the highways of Nairobi. To every workshop where hands still dare to dream. Africa leads now. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe to join a revolution not made in boardrooms, but in sunlight, sweat, and steel. Because this isn't the end. This is the ignition. And the engine has only just begun to roar.